For those of you who have seen my review on the Friday the 13th remake, or actually if you've seen my reviews on any of the horror film remakes over the last couple years, you'll know that I typically dislike any horror film remakes. Now there are some exceptions, but generally I don't like any attempts at remakes of old classic horror films. Now when I heard that a remake of Nightmare on Elm Street was in the works, I was both excited and worried about it. I was excited because I am a huge fan of the first Nightmare on Elm Street. However, I was a bit worried because I was afraid that if they miscast Freddy Krueger, that the movie was going to be bad. Most of my fears were put to rest when I found out that Jackie Earle Haley was cast as Freddy Krueger. As far as I'm concerned, on the small list of guys who you get to play Freddy Krueger nowadays, he would be near the top of the list. So with that in mind, I went into this movie hoping it would be good. And the first thing I want to say about this movie is that Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy was good. He wasn't great, he wasn't phenomenal, he was no Robert Englund, but he was good. That being said, this is quite possibly the worst horror film remake I have seen this decade. Yes, it is that bad. Jackie Earle Haley's performance as Freddy is the only good thing in this movie. Let me repeat that. It is the only good thing in this movie. The script is terrible. The dialogue is terrible. The actors are terrible. The suspense is terrible. The so-called horror is terrible. There is nothing redeeming about this movie. Again, with the exception to Jackie Earle Haley's performance as Freddy. But before I start ranting again, let me give you all a brief synopsis of this movie for those of you who don't know what I'm rambling about. The basis of this story is that roughly 15-20 years ago, a man by the name of Freddy Krueger was working at a local preschool. Now, he was suspected of being a child molester. And when all of the parents of these preschoolers find out that one of the workers of this school might possibly be a pedophile, they find him, chase after him, corner him in this abandoned warehouse, and then proceed to burn the thing down, thus killing Freddy in the process. Skip to many years later, and supposedly these kids who were somehow abused by Freddy are now having these psychotic, demented dreams about him. And the majority of these kids are dying in their dreams. What these kids realize is that Freddy Krueger has somehow come back to life in their dreams, and is able to haunt them in their dreams, and kill them in their dreams. And that is the basis of this movie, as it's been for the majority of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Now some of you may be saying, well, why is it that this movie doesn't work, and the originals did work? I'll give you a few reasons. First and foremost, the horror in the first Nightmare on Elm Street movies were all about atmosphere. The first Nightmare on Elm Street was entirely about setting an extremely creepy and disturbing atmosphere that these kids are having to live through. And the way in which these kids are dying is truly horrific. However, with this film, there is no scary atmosphere. All they do is insert jump scare after jump scare after jump scare. That is one thing that I believe the original movie had very few of, jump scares, while this one is riddled with them. Also, while the first movie didn't have a phenomenal cast, you get the sense that at least these kids might have a future in Hollywood, especially one by the name of Johnny Depp. Yes, the first Nightmare on Elm Street was Johnny Depp's first movie, for those of you who don't know that. However, with this movie, we get a cast that cannot act their way out of a paper bag. And one really big problem that speaks to how badly written this movie was, is that we don't know who we're supposed to follow. Until the last 20 minutes of this movie, there is no protagonist. In all of the previous Nightmare on Elm Street movies, even some of the bad ones, there has always been a clear and precise protagonist or protagonists. You typically knew within the first 5 to 10 minutes who you were going to be following for the rest of the movie. With this recent remake, you can never tell who you're supposed to be following. We're introduced to one guy right off the bat, but within 5 minutes, he's dead. Then we start following another girl, and she's alive for about 5 to 10 minutes. Then she's dead. Then we start following another guy, and he's in there for about 15 or 20 minutes. Then he's dead. And then finally, when we've killed off about 5 or 6 different people, then we get to the last 2 people who could possibly be the main characters. And guess what? The movie only follows them for about 30 minutes. The main characters of this movie are only in the movie for 30 minutes. And it really saddens me that I have to rip on this movie this hard, because there were so many ways this movie could have been good. There were points in this movie where it seemed as though the movie was going in a very good direction. In fact, there is one thing they play off of in this movie that they never play off of in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. It is the thought that Freddy Krueger may have been innocent. Originally, Freddy Krueger, back at this preschool, may have never harmed these kids. He may have been an innocent guy who just liked hanging around a preschool all day. Now, while that's still really suspicious, maybe he didn't do anything wrong. And when they started going down that road, I thought, this is an original spin. This could be good. But by the end of the movie, that premise is so badly ruined that I just hated the movie even more. So, final rating. I actually had high hopes going into this movie, and it may be for that reason that I hated the movie all the more when I left. I wasn't expecting this movie to be remarkable. I wasn't expecting it to be phenomenal, but I was hoping it would be good. If the movie would have kept me entertained, if the writing had been decent, if the cast had been decent, and if there had been a genuinely creepy or scary atmosphere, I would have been very much pleased with this movie. As it turns out, the movie fails on all of these points. I'm going to give this movie 1.5 stars. Those of you who are fans of the original Nightmare on Elm Street, you would be wise to never see this movie. It may in fact extremely anger you, as it has angered me. However, if there's one thing I can say finishing up this review, it's that I should have seen this coming. Shortly after seeing this movie, I found out that the production company that released this movie, which is Platinum Dunes, is also the same production company that was responsible for the following remakes: the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Amityville Horror, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, and Friday the 13th. Yeah, with that track record, I should not be surprised if this movie was complete crap. It would not surprise me in the least if Platinum Dunes soon bought up the rights to Hellraiser and Child's Play and made bullshit remakes out of them as well. Stay tuned, folks. It's probably gonna happen. So, take care.